him up, and then I would come down, I'd pick up his little brother. And one of the biggest challenges was, if it was the winter, was getting him out of the car so that I could hold his older brother's hand and get him to the car safely. But you couldn't get a parking spot that was nearby. And it's like, well, do I leave my immobile 6-year-old child in the car that in a safe place where I know he's safe, and then run the risk of having everybody judge me for leaving my kid in the car? Or do I struggle with pulling the wheelchair out of the trunk, pushing it through the snow, also that I could just take his older brother's hand for 2 minutes to bring him back to the car? Never mind the fun chit chat that the parents and the mothers have before and after school. I never fit in with those groups. I didn't fit in with the working mother. I didn't fit in with the typical mother. And it was really isolating. Hi, I'm Natalie from Toronto, and I am the mother of 2 boys. One who's 18. He's your typical kind of, wait a minute, he's not 18. He's 17, soon to be 18-year-old. And I have a 15-year-old, and his name is Reese. And Reese has a genetic mutation on the KCNQ2 gene. So before I tell you about that genetic mutation, I can go a little bit back into the story of where our life with Reese started. And it began with me really wanting to get pregnant and not being able to. And so my husband and I tried for 3 years through in vitro fertilization with our first. So when I had a typical child, it was awesome. It was pretty much everything that you anticipated it would be. And I was so unbelievably grateful. I wanted a girl, but I had a boy, and that was even a better blessing, because you know what they say, you don't always get what you want, but you get what you need. And we wanted to make our family complete, and we wanted to have a second child. So we tried to get pregnant naturally. And again, it didn't happen without in vitro fertilization. So through healthy eating, acupuncture, we were able to get pregnant, and everything seemed like a dream. And I just remember feeling a really big level of gratitude, just because I had seen so many other women get pregnant. They would fall in love, get engaged, get married, get pregnant, all in the time that we were trying to conceive our first. And that was heartbreaking. And that at the time seemed like the biggest challenge. And I don't want to be melodramatic, but it was like a lot of woe is me. Like, why is everybody else getting pregnant and I'm not? And I had no idea that actually things could get harder. So we had my second pregnancy was pretty normal. We had to have an emergency C-section for my first. So I opted to have a C-section for my second, which actually turned out to be a blessing, because we could rule out any kind of issues with his health challenges due to a very easy delivery. So when Reese was born, he was very adorable. He was totally fine. No one knew of any kind of issue. And then our friends were coming to visit us, Kath and Mike, to see the new baby. And just before they got there, it looked like Reese was passing gas. And in fact, he didn't even have a name at this point. And he would turn bright red, and, and he was swaddled. And because I had had a C-section, I was still really, I could see why people don't have C-sections, just because of the way that you feel after. It's a little bit longer to recover. And that might be one. I don't want to talk about regret, but it is what it is. So nobody really noticed what was wrong with him, but he was having seizures. And then we started the nurse finally recognized that it was a seizure, and then he got into ICU at Mount Sinai. And I was there for 3 days, and I met another couple that came in, and they had triplets. They had also gone through in vitro, and they had the exact same wedding date as my husband and me. And he spoke to the dad, and he said, We were so excited. We also did IVF. We were so excited to have a baby. And then we found out we were having triplets. And so I'm all excited thinking I'm buying 3 strollers. And now we're in the ICU and I'm thinking about potentially getting ramps for 3 wheelchairs because there was a chance that the 3 kids could have cerebral palsy. So you bond with these families in the hospital. You feel so experienced because you've got 3 days under your belt. It literally every day felt like a month. And we went in to the hospital in February when it was winter, and we didn't come out until 3 months later in April when it was spring. And we didn't know what was wrong with him, but he was having upwards of 30 seizures a day. And so there was so many possibilities of what it could be. There was still a lot of hope for me. I still had a lot of hope. So I remember going into the hospital and there was a meeting and they had all of the doctors there. They had everybody that was on his team. It felt like there was about 8 people. And then my husband, which is now my ex-husband, was there as well. And my ex-husband came from a medical background. He's very factual, logical. I'm missing the word that I want for him. But for me, I always had hope. I was never going to give up. And maybe that's just because I didn't have the education. But I think sometimes in a couple, you need someone to provide the hope and someone to have all the medical background and the understanding of the science. And I think that gives you the recipe to keep going. And also, it could have been anything at that point. It could have been I think it was like a B3 deficiency. And friends would say, this happened and this was the positive outcome. And I just soaked up those stories. I mean, and also on the flip side, I had somebody come and we were in the moms group together and she showed up at my house after Reese was born and she brought her healthy newborn with her and was complaining about how the baby's not sleeping. And I just was like, holy fuck. Like, talk to me about not sleeping when you're recording the seizure schedule. What did he look like? Did he turn his head to the left or the right? And just write down in the notes, how many seconds was he seizing for? Like, I don't think I slept at all. And you get through it, but there are certain triggers that will take me back to being in the hospital. And one of them is the smell of hospital soap. So like, you'll be there for whatever, for a clinical checkup or whatever. And you go and you wash your hands and then I smell it. And all I can remember is like this was before Mount Sinai was renovated. So it's like really 1960s bathroom with mint, pastel pink sinks and plastic bowls. And you're washing these baby bottles because Reese wouldn't breastfeed. And I didn't have a really big maternal instinct, probably confidence. I didn't think that was something that I could do. But when somebody takes something away from you, and I knew the beauty of breastfeeding with my first, it was just like these series of losses. And you don't even recognize until you can look back that they actually they're really big. There was just nobody, there's nobody who understands what you're going through in that moment that's going to tell you that's a big deal and I feel you. And so that has probably been the theme. So Reese is now 15 and I so adore my friends that I've built. It's taken me a long time to build friends with kids who have special needs. And I didn't know what a journey this was going to be because it just seemed like there was a lot of worry. There's a lot of worry because you've got 2 kids. It's not just one. And there's the financial aspect because originally you're thinking, maybe the universe only gives you as much as you can handle in the moment because we were told Reese was going to have delays and we're like, okay, well, yeah, I mean, he may not go to university. I know lots of successful people who couldn't go to university. And then it was like, maybe he'll get a job in the mailroom. he's not going to go to college. He's not going to go to high school. And then it was like, he's not going to speak. He's not going to be able to see. He's not going to be able to walk. He's not going to be able to chew his own food. But he is so cute. And I'm lucky because like not all of my friends' kids are beautiful. And then that's where my guilt starts to come in. So like, why am I lucky enough? Of course, they're only cute for so long, but it's like, when they talk about the tax of, whether it's the black tax or the women's tax or whatever, there's got to be a credit for being the cute baby because the cute baby is always going to get more attention. And so when I know my kid's getting more attention because he looks typical, I feel guilty. And guilt has been a really big theme for me in my life. And it's like,
how do you think you can heal that?
Well, I don't know that I can. I don't know that I think that one of the things that I was taught, and it took me a long time to really understand this. It started with when I was in the hospital, and one of the nurses gave me the poem Welcome to Holland. And they gave me a newsletter to Holland Bloorview, which was our local, well, it's a rehabilitation hospital, but it's more than that. It's for kids with special needs. And I'm like, my kid's just having seizures. That's not for us. That's not for people like us. We are not going to have that. And I had my mother came in to the hospital and she loved Reese unconditionally from the get-go. And she was just like, no matter what he's going to turn out to be, we will love him. I'm like, Mom, I don't want this. And I just wanted to be a little kid and stomp my foot and say, no, I reject this. I reject this baby. I reject this life. If maybe if I could stand up for myself for the first time in my life, I'm going to get what I want. But I knew right then. I wasn't really rejecting him. I was just trying it on just to give myself like a hot second, just to say, I don't have to accept this. But the one piece of advice that I received that was so good was, I don't even know if it I didn't even know I was allowed to grieve, because if I'm grieving, then that means that I'm accepting something that I don't want to accept. And when nobody knows what's wrong with your child, like nobody said to me, similar due dates to mine, and I can see their child progressing, or I can see Reese falling behind the other children. And then your social life. See, this is the hard thing to follow that advice. The sooner you accept it, the easier it will be. Well, no, because all of a sudden, those invitations to brunches stop happening. Those Sunday brunches where you do things as a couple, whether it's because you've divorced or whether it's because your kid won't stop crying. Like, I couldn't even take him to a rest stop without some man saying to me, can you just stop your kid from crying for a little bit? And it's like, dude, if I could, I would. If I could get him to hold his head up, I'd just be so much happier. If he could just sit in a high chair and have his head be held up and not be like this. And then he does it. But you're like, oh, but why can't he say my name? I would just do anything if I could hear him say mama. So, I talk this, I don't want to say I talk this big talk, but it's like acceptance. I don't know if I'm there yet. I'm further along than I ever was before, but I'm not, it has not been easy. At each stage of your life, it's a different challenge. And so from there, I invested in every single therapy that we could afford. I did everything that I could to make sure that he stayed in a school that had PT and OT and communication services. And um, I'm really not sure if it made a difference. I was really happy with the school that he was at. I felt a sense of community because I knew that they loved him. I don't know how, but these people are so awesome, and they loved Reese as much as I did. And so that gave me a sense of security in the sense that I could, when I dropped him off, especially in the summer, they had a sister summer camp. And when I dropped him off there, I knew he was okay. And I knew he was being taken care of, which allowed me to be happy or just give my mind a rest. But the thing is that when he was in school, the school was far away. So I started drop off at 8. I came home by about 10. And then I started it again at about 2. And I picked him up. And then I would come down and I'd pick up his little brother. And one of the biggest challenges was, if it was the winter, was getting him out of the car so that I could hold his older brother's hand and get him to the car safely. But you couldn't get a parking spot that was nearby. And it's like, well, do I leave my immobile 6-year-old child in the car that in a safe place where I know he's safe, and then run the risk of having everybody judge me for leaving my kid in the car? Or do I struggle with pulling the wheelchair out of the trunk, pushing it through the snow, also that I could just take his older brother's hand for 2 minutes to bring him back to the car? Never mind the fun chit chat that the parents and the mothers have before and after school. I never fit in with those groups. I didn't fit in with the working mother. I didn't fit in with the typical mother. And it was really isolating, especially because Reese went to an Orthodox Jewish school and I'm not Orthodox, nor am I Jewish. They were amazing people to let us become a part of their community, but there was like a very hard line where it's like, yeah, but you're different. And so I made an effort to make friends with other special needs mothers, to the point where I joined a group on a Facebook group. There's 200 people in that group. I invited all of them over to my house, and I would say between 8 and 10 women showed up, and then we made it a monthly thing. And that's how I started connecting. And it was really hard, and it was scary. It was exhausting, because like the last thing you want to do in the evening when you've got a kid with special needs, you just want to put your feet up and watch Netflix. And I didn't. And I feel that's actually the reason why I'm here today. Like, I wouldn't be connected with the makers of this podcast, YouTube video, if I had not done that. So from there, Reese was at school and he started getting bigger. And so I used to run every day and I would work out, and I made sure that I was in good enough shape to be able to carry him up and down the stairs. And I knew that at one point it was going to be a challenge, because I ran a half marathon pushing Reese in a jogging stroller once when he was 7 and once when he was 8, to raise money for the school. And I raised $60,000 for that school in a time when social media wasn't a big thing. It was a completely different time. I knew when I did that fundraising, I made a video, and at the end of it, I said, "We're running for those who can't." And I wasn't sure how much longer I was going to be able to keep running, how much longer I was going to be able to keep carrying a 50-pound child up and down the stairs. So that cute little small fry, as I like to call him, is only going to get bigger and bigger. And so he did get bigger, and he started having stomach issues, and the crying that I was talking about at meal times related to his digestion. So if you've got a child with low motility, you're going to have a child with low motility if your child doesn't walk. So, and then when that happens, so basically it just wasn't digesting. So he started to vomit, and he started vomiting a lot. And when I say a lot, like, I'm not sure what a lot is to some people, but we used to keep a towel on his lap because he was vomiting so much. And so before the pandemic, he was vomiting 60 times a day. So by the time I had taken his shirt off, he had vomited on his pants. And the smell, like, is just enough to push you over the edge. So Reese was having problems with his digestion because he doesn't walk. And so when you don't walk, your digestive system has low motility, and it makes things more difficult. So when I was referring to him crying at that truck stop, it had to do with his mealtime. So he would eat, and he loved eating, but then he would cry. And I didn't understand what it was. I didn't understand if it was behavioral or what the case may be. But then soon he started vomiting afterwards. And it was I mean, it's a layman's interpretation of what happened, but I think it was his way of dealing with either the gas or the constipation. And so the vomiting became a part of our daily life, and I didn't go anywhere without a towel on his lap. And during the pandemic, the beginning of the pandemic, we had planned for surgery for Reese. He was going to have his hips adjusted, and we were going to cut the tendon in it's a bilateral cut on both of his hamstrings and both of his calves, because he was getting more increased tone. So whereas a typical child with their legs would be straight up and down, Reese's were starting to bend like this. And the hips we knew were going to cause pain later on. But because it was the pandemic, everything was being pushed and pushed and pushed. And eventually our turn came up, but they didn't have enough OR time to do the surgery as it relates to his hips. And so we did the surgery, and I had to go into quarantine in another hospital room before I could be in his hospital room. And it was the beginning, and it was a really tough time. There's no visitors, there's masks, it's hot, he's cranky, he's bored, he's in a lot of pain. And I started to lose myself a little bit. And what I was using to cope up until that point, and at that point, he was about 11, I would say, I was running. And I remember I would run in the morning just to try to keep some semblance of a routine while I was going to see him in the hospital. And I heard something snap in my Achilles, and it was not enough to have somebody come and pick me up in the car, but it was enough for me not to continue running. And it never got better. And in fact, it only got worse. And so the tear in my Achilles tendon that I did not know what it was because you couldn't even see a doctor just got progressively worse. And as soon as I stopped running, I stopped working out, and I started to lose my way. And Reese also had a surgery to tie his stomach around his esophagus so that would stop the food from coming up. And it worked really well for the first 3 months. And I thought, this is a dream. And then it stopped working. And then he started vomiting again. So he came home from the hospital, and that's where he was continuing to, it was progressive up until about 60 vomits a day. But also at that point, when he came home, I could no longer carry him in the same way that I could. And I tore my psoas muscle, which is a muscle in the front of your body, but it presents the pain in the back. So then I couldn't even stand up long enough to fold laundry. And then I stopped being able to walk altogether. And I managed to put on 110 pounds within, I'd say, about a year and a half. And it debilitated me. To go from somebody who runs half marathons to being a woman who can't even walk around the block. So when you identify as, I'm not going to say a professional athlete, but I enjoy sports. I enjoy the dopamine that you get when you run, when you compete. And I also used to play a lot of tennis. growing up. And then I took it up again when Reese was a baby. And the thing is that every time I was playing tennis, if it was during the day, I felt guilty. And I felt guilty because when I was growing up, my dad used to make us total all of the things we'd accomplished in a given day. So I felt that by playing the sport in my free time, which was between 10 and 2, that I was acting like a lady of leisure. And I felt this tremendous guilt that I wasn't working. And now when I look back, I wish somebody had just said to me, Natalie, you're doing something for your mental health and well-being and your physical well-being. And the fact that you're taking your kids to and from all of their programs, starting from 7 a.m. until they get to school, and then the after-school programs. And then his dad would pick them up when he was done work. So I was doing everything surrounding that. And I just felt like no matter what I was doing, it wasn't enough. And I felt a tremendous amount of guilt from my eldest son as well. But he seemed okay. Like he didn't seem unhappy. And there would be like spurts where what I was doing was I was taking his brother Owen to all of his tennis programs and spending all that time after school with Reese. And we had a caregiver until Reese started going to school. So we did have a caregiver for a little bit of time, especially in the beginning when Reese was in the hospital. We definitely needed a caregiver. But once Reese started kindergarten, she left us. And so what I did was I would take Owen to his programs, the sports programs, and that particular tennis club had a daycare. So I would put him in the daycare for 1 to 2 hours, and if I wasn't doing something like either watching Owen or physically doing exercise for me, like if I wanted to catch up on my email with my computer, I felt guilty. And I don't know where these rules came from. But I felt like I wanted to be the best mother that I could be. And I'm not even sure who I was comparing myself to, because I didn't have close friends that had kids with special needs. So there was nobody to say, this is how it's done. Like the only thing that I had were my mother's friends who had special needs kids. And, that's like 20 to 30 years earlier. And I also knew that there was like this tremendous amount of paperwork that needed to be done. So I was having to figure out, which therapist was doing what, which receipts had, what have we paid for, what needed to be submitted to insurance. And it's a full-time job. And if you couple that with the fact that I was going through a divorce, and not to get into the intricacies of that or the details of that divorce, it was extremely stressful. But I thought that I was supposed to be okay. I thought I was supposed to be handling it better. What I didn't realize that a long divorce and having a child with severe special needs is trauma. And if you couple that with the trauma that I had growing up, it's a lot of trauma. But I kept trying to stick it underneath the carpet somewhere, just hide it, say it's not there. And ultimately, I punished myself on the inside. So people said that I was a good mother or I was good at doing anything. I'm like, oh no, they must say that to everybody. Because what mother wouldn't? And there are some mothers that can't actually do some of the things that is expected of them. So it's just lonely. It's just lonely. So, Reese and his brother and I and my boyfriend spent so many countless hours together. And I would really like to give my boyfriend Russell some credit, because he is 14 years younger than I am. And I never thought that a 26-year-old man would want to hang out with a 40-year-old woman with 2 children, let alone child with severe special needs. And he got right in there. I never dreamt that I would find somebody that would want to date me, let alone a 26-year-old that's willing to date a woman with 2 children, one with severe special needs. But not only did he got right in there. And because he was so much younger than me, and there's always pluses and minuses to every situation, but he was closer to being a kid than I was. So he wasn't cynical. He was happy. He would dress Reese up like a rapper and bounce him all around the house in the sideways cap and then the plastic jewelry. And because I had been through so much stress and so much trauma, I didn't have that joyful energy. So what he brought to our family was incredible. What I will say is, after Reese left his school, the Orthodox Jewish school, he went to a public school because by the time you reach the age of 7, you can no longer stay in an Orthodox school because he's not the right religion. So he graduated and he went to a congregated public school in Toronto. And they did not have physical therapy daily in class with physical therapists, and they did not have PT, but they did have some really incredible teachers. And again, a set of teachers that loved our kids. So the school that he went to made me feel like I was part of a community, but he was picked up by a bus and he was dropped off by the bus. So while the complaint was that I was driving too much before, now I have more time in my day and I was able to get a full-time contract. I didn't have any connections whatsoever. School was all the way downtown. I'm at the top of the city. And not only did I not have the same connection with teachers, I didn't connect any of the other parents. So I would show up for the social teas or whatever they tried to offer. But to drive all the way downtown at the end of the day, it was going to take me easily 50 minutes. I didn't want to do it. Or if I was already downtown, you had to wait 2 hours for the party, like the get together to start. So it was just difficult. And so, but I slowly showed up at events and connected with other mothers. And as I was also building my community through the internet, I guess I would say, I started to feel more confident. And then there was a smaller group of women at our school, and we did a sleepover. And I started to get to know some of the other women. And it's not like your typical friendship because you know that they're all going through their own issues. And so the interesting thing about that is that even though you're not seeing them all the time, you're not going to concerts, the time that you do spend with them becomes more meaningful. So your level of connection is the same as you would have with a typical relationship, but with all this grace. So like if you don't talk to them for a year and they call you and they say, "Can you meet me?" and you can, you will. And there's no resentment, like where the flip have you been and why weren't you there for me? And
do you get that from typical relationships,
No.
like parents or
no? And so I don't. One of the things that I find really difficult is my relationships with my family and my friends. And I don't blame them and I don't hold a grudge, but they don't understand what we go through. And I know that. And here's how I know that they don't, no matter how empathetic they are or how much they try or they don't try. I know that, and it's been a struggle for me. And so that will come up again in a couple of minutes because Reese's next part of his journey was by the time the end of the pandemic had rolled around, I was falling apart. I'd fallen apart mentally, and physically I had completely fallen apart. And my oldest son was also, he was suffering as well, just like most of the kids in the city were. If you didn't have a cottage to go to or a second home or even a backyard, if all you did was sit in front of your computer for those 2 years, he didn't want to go outside, and I developed agoraphobia, and I didn't want to go outside. I did not want people to see me, and I couldn't walk. So that made things really difficult. I went to go see a doctor, and I said to the sports doctor, I said, I'm having this problem with my Achilles, and he just looked at me and he goes, just lose weight. And I'm like, you know what I think of it. And I went and I found another doctor, and that doctor said to me, yeah, it's a problem. You probably should start with small exercises. And so I did that. And with those small exercises, I gained a little bit of confidence, and I showed up and I saw a chiropractor, and he gave me different exercises. And I didn't all of a sudden go on this crazy ass diet and lose this weight. What I did was I started showering. So I wasn't sure. Why would I shower if I'm not leaving the house? And if you don't shower, you don't feel good. And then I started putting on makeup. And if you put makeup on, you got to take it off, which meant I was washing my face at the end of the day. Did not know how beneficial that is mentally. It sounds bananas. Like maybe other women will get it. I don't know. Because if I said it to myself, I'm like, why? And the other thing is that I would make my bed every morning. So I think I started that about 2.5 years ago. And now I'm a woman who, before I even go to the bathroom, I pull the covers up and I make my bed. So that when I walk back into my room, a few hours later, it doesn't feel like, A, I'm not going to crawl back in because the bed's made. And B, it doesn't remind me of any bad choices that I'd made the night before. It's a fresh day. So I added in good things, and I wasn't about removing the bad things. And then as I started to drink more water, if I was drinking more alcohol, it just dissipated, and it gave me the power to stop drinking for very long periods of time. And I want to be honest, if there's a time where I'm having a lull or a really hard time, it's usually when I've let alcohol come back into my life. And I have addiction in my family, and so it's important to me not to be an alcoholic. Like my most important message is, if you want to feel better, just don't drink for a while. And you will notice that food starts to taste better. You sleep better. You don't have anxiety the next day. So and apparently they say that you only need to have one glass of wine, and it takes 7 days to leave your system. So socially, we're told it's okay to have a drink. And every time I do it, it leads me down this friggin' path that I don't enjoy. So I'll put that there on the shelf. But I will say is, as soon as I stopped drinking and I started putting really small steps into my life, and I also started doing something called HIPAA breath work. And it was a modality that really helped me come out of my shell, because what it did was it allowed me to breathe, which obviously delivers more oxygen to your brain. It allowed me to create a vision for what I wanted for my life and be able to find a possibility of what it looked like. So, for instance, I was in the dumps, and I was introduced to HIPAA breathwork, and I did it for the first time. And I just felt so unbelievably trapped in my home and in my life that I couldn't see an out. By the time I had done my first session, I realized that I could apply to the Starlight Foundation, that they might be able to help me find somebody to go on this trip with me, or I might find the funds to hire somebody to come with me to be able to take Reese and Owen and me on a trip that I never thought was possible. But if you don't have any hope and you don't dream, you can't see any possibilities. All I could feel was this dark cloud. It just followed me everywhere. And I still have not done that trip yet. But just knowing that there was space to do it, it felt like somebody was taking those heavy weights off my shoulders. So that's what I did. And I just basically kept putting one foot in front of the other. So just by making small improvements, it gave me the ability to have a little bit more hope that I had in the beginning and that I had lost. And it was during this time that my ex-husband had been, for lack of a better word, pushing to have Reese put into a group home. And I didn't want to do it. And I wasn't like totally opposed to the idea, but I didn't want to do it. And I certainly didn't want to be the one to do it. And so the way that it goes is first of all, I was told that there are no spots in Canada. There are very, very few group homes. I didn't want to go into a group home, even though I knew that it would help me. I don't even think I thought about that. I know that now, and I also know it would give my eldest son a chance at life, and for us to experience something that we had never been able to experience, because we were so tethered to a wheelchair and getting in and out. Like everything, every move you make has to be planned. And I think that's the part where the families and our friends don't understand. Like when they want to go to the variety store to get something or the convenience store to get something, they can just go. But we can't. Like first you got to clean the feeding bag, and then you've got to pack up the bag, and then you've got to get towels for the vomiting. And my family used to criticize me because I was always late. And I was always late because I'm kind of like a person who puts things off. Yes, but also it takes a lot more for me to get out the door. But what I found was when we had the opportunity to put Reese into a group home, I was told that if you don't accept the opportunity right now, you basically go to the end of the line, and that could be another 8-year wait. And there's also, if you don't get your child into a group home before they're 18, the chances of ever getting into a group home is next to that. And I would see these documentaries on the CBC of entire families of like 4 or 5 people basically taking shifts to take care of one of the siblings. And I didn't want that for my eldest son. Neither did my ex-husband. And that was our biggest worry. And our biggest worry was, are we going to have enough money for him to survive on his own once we passed? And we knew at the early days, we were spending about $100,000 on Reese. That's what he cost to go to school and all of his therapies. And of course you can cut back, but you want to give your kid everything that you can. And as I say that, I recognize that not everyone has those funds, but that also migrates into all of, why aren't the funds more easily accessible for the people who need them? And why are the people who are getting audited for tax season usually special needs parents? Like those are the people who need more time. Those are the people who need bookkeepers to help them. And the system is a series of navigations, and it feels like secrets. And that's why you need to be on a WhatsApp chat group where somebody sends this link, because you wouldn't have seen it otherwise. So as I was developing all of those relationships, and at the same time Reese was about to go into a group home, he goes into the group home, and I just couldn't believe it happened as quickly as it did. It went from him being at home forever to us finding out that he had a spot, and him going, I would say all within 2.5 months. Reese moves into the group home, and what they don't tell you, and this has to do with the different stages of grief, what they don't tell you is how to handle your emotions when you do put him into a home. So the people and the staff of the group home that he's in, the program that helped him get in there, were really wonderful. And they understood, and they said it was okay to cry, and they said you could come visit him whenever you wanted to, which is all true. But when you go in, you had to wear a face mask. You had to wear, basically it felt like you were putting on a hazmat suit and then a shield, because it was the pandemic. So he's in this new place that's 35 minutes from my house, which is very, very close. And I'm really grateful for that. But there was like it was just that extra barrier. And it felt like I had given up on him. And then it started to feel normal that he wasn't located there anymore. And then I started to feel guilty. I felt guilty that I had put him in a group home. And then I felt guilty because I was starting to feel normal. And I remember I went in to Bloorview and I still do all of his meetings, all of his doctor's appointments, all of those things. It's just, I'm not the one now packing the bag, and I'll meet the caregiver who comes in a van to go down to the hospital together. And I had gotten to Bloorview a half an hour earlier, and I ran into one of the mothers from his public school. And I asked her how she was doing. And she said to me, yeah, I'm okay. It's like, medication is a lot. It's a lot. I'm not having I'm having a hard time. Wasn't complaining. She was just talking about her daughter's medication and how she's not sleeping and how she's finding work really difficult. And I don't even know if I could make eye contact with her, but I started to cry. And I'm trying to articulate how I feel, but the way it felt to me in that moment was that all of the other parents of kids with special needs, I felt like we're not all the same, but because I talked about the differences and how every situation is different, but ultimately we all have that same level of stress and things are really difficult. And I felt like we were in it together, especially the moms at this particular school. It felt like we were in the same house and that house had been set on fire. And I was able to run out of the house before it burned down, and I left all of my friends inside. And I'm surprised I'm not crying now, because every time I think about that, I feel guilty. And maybe I'm not crying because I since spoke to some of the other mothers and they said, no, actually, Natalie, I don't feel like that. And I realize that even though some parents have a really tough journey, not everybody feels awful. It's great. It's a gift. It's a gift. Then I started to feel really alone all over again. And then I started to feel like Reese is in this group home and I'm the only one I know who has actually put their child in. So it's just that part is a challenge. It's been 2 years now. It's not getting any easier. And I talked about grief. There's a book called Ambiguous Loss. And basically it's about when you can't identify, like when somebody hasn't actually passed away and you just don't know where they are. It's like this loss that you can't measure. So like when somebody passes away, everybody understands that. You know, they provide their comfort and they say that they're sorry for your loss. But when your friends recognize that your life is completely changed, they don't know what to do. And friends and family don't understand where I'm coming from. And the reason why I was so confident that I knew that they didn't understand was because it's been a while now that Reese has not been at home and he's living in a group home, and I'm starting to adjust. And I'm not like kissing the earth, the moon, and the stars every day for having this freedom. I'm starting to have normal people problems. And there was never any time for normal people problems before because that was never my focus. So I'm starting to feel really, embarrassed that I feel self-absorbed to have these typical problems like mood swings or weight gain, or I'm irritated that I can't do the sport I want to do because I've torn another muscle, or the fact that I'm spending more time figuring out what the heck menopause is and why is it happening to me? Like, I didn't have time for that kind of thing. I didn't have time for anxiety. And I think that's kind of funny because I think it's kind of funny that I'm worried about anxiety now. And I'm like, why didn't that happen earlier? Like when all the shit was hitting the fan, why could I hold myself together? And now that everything's easier. Now that everything's easier, I can't handle anything. And I'm starting to find that I can't relate. And so I also have a a group chat with the Ontario and Quebec mothers of kids with the same genetic mutation that Reese has, which I don't think I said at the beginning, which is he has a genetic.
Yeah, you did.
Did I? Okay, I won't go into it again. But the point is that we have a small group of moms, and one of the mother's daughters passed away. And she wrote us. She said, I don't know if I can stay in this group anymore. And I get it. I get it, because it's like it's hard to listen to the mothers talk about their pain and their problems when you don't have them anymore. And and I'm not going to speak on behalf of this particular mother, but I know that I found it very difficult to listen to our moms chat in the group, and they're commiserating and talking and sharing problems, and I don't want to hear it. And I almost don't get it anymore. And I also don't have what I call that Reese muscle, which is, if you left Reese with me for hours on end, could I make it through a day? I don't think I could. So I'm struggling. And I said to my son, Owen, he's going off to university, and I said to him, I don't know where I fit anymore. I'm not a typical mother. I am not a typical mother of a child with special needs. And I am trying to find my place in this world through some sort of purpose. And I don't know what it is. And I just I feel self-indulgent right now. This morning, I ran into another mother, and it's actually the mother of one of Reese's girlfriends, who every time she sees him, she runs up to him and she tries to give him a hug and a kiss. It's Taylor. And she said to me, she's like, Natalie, how are you? And I said, not great these days. I'm feeling really vulnerable. And I said, how are you? And she's like, I'm actually doing really well. And I said, tell me about it. I want to hear. And she said, I started exercising, and I fought my husband tooth and nail, and I didn't want to do it. And I found out that when I exercise, I feel better. And I was so happy. I was so happy to hear that she was happy. And then when she started to talk about her own challenges, some of them made me laugh. And it was just having that connection with another mother that understands you and accepts you so unconditionally, no matter who chooses to send their child to a group home, who doesn't, to appreciate the mothers who've lost their children and where they fit now. It's a struggle, and it's also a fear that a lot of us don't talk about in the group chats, because none of us want to go through it. And so I can appreciate and feel that there's an isolation with that too. So what I want is for other mothers of kids with special needs to feel the love and appreciation that I've been so lucky to find with a handful of women. I feel like I've learned a series of lessons. The first one being, the sooner you accept your life for what it is and stop trying to change it, the happier you'll be. It's a very hard thing. Giving yourself some grace to make mistakes, to know that you're a better mother than you actually think that you are. I feel like when you put yourself out there and you do even something as small as smiling at a stranger, you're actually going to receive more than you could actually know. And by going out each day and being a part of the community is a lifeline. I just never thought it was going to be me.
You are a good mother. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for asking. I really didn't want to do it.
I know.
It was really hard. It was really hard. But now that it's done, I feel closer to you, and I feel lighter. I feel
closer to you too.
Being able to talk about it.
I didn't know everything.
Really?
We just kind of look at each other in the eye sometimes, and I say, oh, we know each other. Like, we've got this. We both are on the same, battlefield
Yeah.
in a sense, right?